Good evening, folks, and welcome back to yet another episode with your boy Nat in the Lore Lounge. And boy, does it seem like the dragons just keep on coming. But this time though, they're sparkly, they're beautiful, they got freaking psionic powers like Fin Fang Foom and Professor X and Emma Frost all had a love child somehow. And of course, we are talking about gem dragons. I do want to preface this video with the fact I know something funky is up with my eye. I think I've been bitten by something. What that might be, I don't know. It's not giving me any superpowers, so I guess it's just a waiting game now as to whether I'm gonna survive or not. So fingers crossed. We have a little bit of a problem here though, gang. I know I promised I would try to stick to 5th edition canon as best as I could, but at the moment, we only have one stat block for any of the gem dragons currently published in 5th edition. So what am I gonna do? I tell you what I was to do. I was to go out and spend a couple of bob on some PDFs of the Draconomicon and the Monster Manual 2 from 3.5 edition and see what we're likely to expect from the missing gem dragons that we don't currently have in 5th edition. Is everything I'm about to tell you canonical to 5th edition? Who the hell knows? We've had a playtest of psionic powers, but in terms of the actual dragons, I've just kind of had to cherry pick what I think is likely to be in 5th edition as best as my tiny pea brain will allow. So, without further ado, I am going to cast animal shapes on myself and take the form of a turkey in a chicken coop, act like I belong here, so that we can answer the question, what the gem dragons? Now, gem dragons have had a minor introduction in the stat block that we currently have in 5th edition, so we do know that they are all reclusive in nature, and this does line up quite nicely with the neutral alignment that they've been given in the Monster Manual of 3.5 edition. Most gem dragons will make their lairs far from civilization, and the only real interaction that they have with intelligent creatures is to gather servants or glorified Uber drivers to tend to their interests in those civilizations while they kind of chill on their lonesome eating the KFC that's been delivered. And although you might assume this means all gem dragons are shy and introverted, this is actually quite the opposite for some of the gem dragons. Some gem dragons can actually be suave and charismatic and would probably wear a velvet robe if a tailor was able to make one big enough, because they are fantastic conversationalists. But keep in mind this doesn't apply to all gem dragons, but if you meet the right one, you might feel quite relaxed and at home if you meet them. Sadio the ruby dragon rules over the gem dragons and is said to dwell in a floating citadel made of ruby and red gold. This citadel can only be glimpsed in the night sky, and it appears to be a crimson shooting star floating through the constellations when it's glimpsed. Now, gem dragons are the only dragons, and in fact some of the only creatures, that have innate psionic abilities. When they hatch and can still be considered cute, they will develop telepathic powers, and these powers will continue to grow as they do and, I guess, become worth more money. These powers often have them battling against aberrations and other psionic creatures such as aboleths and mind flayers, especially in locations in which the far realm has begun to seep into or intrude into the material plane. I appreciate the last sentence may have meant nothing to you, but just imagine this. A bunch of H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu monsters from a realm that is of complete madness and utter incomprehension, and they're trying to get into the material plane. The neutral dragons, they're having none of it. First, let's start off with the gem dragon that we do have some official 5th edition material for, the Sapphire Dragon. These blue gem dragons are the most territorial to a fairly dangerous degree, so you better be careful if you're looking to steal any of the magic armor and weapons they're so very preciously covet. Their powerful psionic abilities are made evident with the way that the tips of their horns and the barbs of their tail just float in place, held together by their psionic power. I personally think that's probably a bit of unnecessary energy expenditure, but who am I to judge? These floating spines will actually shift with the dragon's mood. They might bob in place when the dragon's amused, or they'll flare and point forward should you anger the dragon. And if you anger a Sapphire Dragon, that might be when they use their sonic breath. And it isn't sonic like Sonic the Hedgehog, which might be confusing because they're both blue. It's sonic as in, like, supersonic, which doesn't explain anything, but it's funny and I'm keeping it in the video. Sapphire dragons will dig away at the meat of the caves and caverns that they dwell in, creating these dizzying patterns of secret passageways and tunnels in which they'll be able to stalk and ambush any intruders. And these caves won't always be in the material plane. Sapphire dragons have been known to make their homes in the elemental plane of Earth. Sapphire Dragons are a warlike group, fortifying and defending their territory with a sort of militarism. They will set traps and plan strategic maneuvers in order to be able to scope out intruders and wait for the opportune moment to strike.
They drew first blood, not me.
That was my Rambo impression. I don't think it's going to get much better than that. That's as good as it's getting, I'm sorry. Due to their cave-digging nature, they often find themselves at odds with drow and dwarfs, but on the flip side, will actually train deep gnomes to form a sort of militia that they can use to help to protect their lair. Next up we have Topaz Dragons, and these suckers at full maturity have barely visible scales and appear to be made out of solid topaz, and if like me you have no idea what topaz is, it's a sort of burnt orange coloured gem. They're the most erratic of all the gem dragons, and a friendly conversation may turn very dangerous should you get on its bad side or get a little bit boring, so be on your best behaviour and make sure you got that sharp wit ready to keep the jokes going. Being chaotic neutral, these guys are full on loco and they have no real allegiance to anyone other than themselves and just being complete and utter loony loons. Loony loons. Loony lunatics. Yes, I love it. Being loony lunatics. They have a dehydrating breath weapon, which in my head doesn't even make any sense. Like, realistically, wouldn't you have to breathe in to dehydrate someone? Which is crazy in of itself, so, you know, way loco. Woo! In the material plane, they make their lairs on secluded beaches or partially submerged caves, but they use their psionic abilities to make sure the lair itself remains completely dry. This is because they're a sit on the side of the pool type as opposed to actually getting their feet wet. They love chilling where the waves create huge gusts of sea spray and are able to use those same spots to scope out prey to eat, such as sharks or squids. Being here often puts them at loggerheads with bronze dragons, and this is because Topaz Dragons are already extremely wary of intruders and they're just utterly bonkers. This gets even worse if the bronze dragon is polymorphed into something that the Topaz Dragon might think is prey. Topaz Dragons are also known to inhabit the elemental plane of water, and they still keep their lairs completely dry, which is no easy feat when you're in a plane that is literally nothing but water. Emerald dragons, with its scales ranging from a beautiful sea green to a deep mint, are highly inquisitive and intelligent. They are fascinated by the local history of the region that it inhabits, and it's even said that the knowledge an emerald dragon is able to obtain from this region will likely surpass that of any sage or scholar. Strangely then, emerald dragons are extremely paranoid and even agoraphobic to a point. This agoraphobia doesn't seem to apply when the emerald dragon makes his home in the elemental plane of air, but in the material plane, it will make its lair far enough away from civilization that it doesn't make its presence known, but close enough that it can continue its studies into the local history of the area. They make their lairs near inactive and active volcanoes and will set traps and alarms just so as not to be caught unaware by intruders or even just visitors. When they're in the inner planes, they will still make sure to keep a close eye on their home in the material plane. There seems to be quite a common Rambo-esque feel going on here, and it kind of pains me that I'm probably going to have to leave all the Rambo jokes until I've perfected the voice, but, you know, maybe in the next video I can just do loads of Rambo impressions instead of doing anything about Dungeons and Dragons whatsoever, just to make up for letting you guys down. I'm sorry. Just because they're a bit antisocial though, doesn't mean emerald dragons are wimps. They're just very cautious when it comes to combat. Emerald dragons will use spells such as Fog Cloud before hitting their enemies with their sonic breath weapon, which they've shamelessly stolen from Sapphire Dragons, just so they can soften them up a little bit before they engage in any kind of melee combat. Crystal dragons are a fairly friendly bunch in comparison to a lot of the gem dragons, and quite enjoy the company of strangers should they be intriguing in some way or at least fairly friendly in appearance. They are also the highest on the list in terms of difficulty when it comes to me not making jokes about stripper names, but I will continue to try my best. Their scales are translucent, and moon and starlight actually causes them to luminesce, and the light of the sun makes them sparkle with a dazzling brilliance. They also make their homes in the elemental plane of air, but if they're on the material plane, they like to make their lairs in high mountain peaks, which often puts them at odds with white dragons. These lairs will be covered in beautifully sculpted ice sculptures, which they spend most of their free time sculpting like a winged Michelangelo. That's a good reference, actually. Crystal dragons aren't completely blameless in the conflict with white dragons, and this is because they steal white dragon eggs. But it isn't anything malicious. Crystal dragons actually steal those eggs in the hopes that they can rear the dragons into more friendly creatures than if they were with solely white dragon parents. Another 5 Nearly Nerds points if you can answer me this question. Crystal dragons have another group of creatures that they're not big fans of, and this is because they often hunt with white dragons. Who are they? Ding, 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 ding. No, there's no time limit. You just tell me whenever you want. Drop the answer in the comments. When it comes to combat, crystal dragons aren't too keen and they prefer not to fight if at all possible. But, as with all dragons, won't back down from a fight. Should a fight be instigated, what will happen is the crystal dragon will use its light breath weapon, which will be like a giant UV bulb to blind its enemies before taking to the air to use its psionic abilities. Amethyst dragons are another dragon based on a gem that I was unsure on, really solidifying the fact that my career as a jeweler might not take off. But in any case, amethyst is actually a beautiful lavender colour, and these dragons' scales actually look like they formed from naturally occurring crystals. These dragons are wise and regal, and due to their agreeable nature, often serve as intermediaries or as a neutral party between warring factions and even warring dragons. So if you're dating an amethyst dragon and you expect them to also think the girl you work with is a bitch, you're probably out of luck. Amethyst dragons, much like sapphire dragons, are burrowers, not to be confused with borrowers, and they also make their homes in the elemental plane of earth. Their caves, just as sapphire dragons are, will also be mazes of tunnels and secret passages that they've carved through the ages. The difference here, however, is amethyst dragons aren't sitting waiting to ambush the intruders, will actually just use these passages to find ways to avoid conflict if at all possible. If conflict is inevitable, amethyst dragons will deal with the battle pragmatically. They'll use their concussive breath weapon and psionic powers to attack from a distance, and if the battle seems unwinnable, they're not too proud to run. Are there other dragons? Absolutely. The more time and the more money that I spend on 3.5 edition, the more I realise there are gazillions, but I don't want to bombard you with dragon after dragon, and I've already strayed quite far from my 5th edition canon path, so for now, true dragons are going to stay finito. Of course, if you guys want to hear about lesser dragons or dragonkin, I'm more than happy to oblige. I can never say no to a pretty face. In any case, I once again thank you for joining me. I bid you adieu and remind you to join me next week in the Lore Lounge. If you enjoyed that video, why not subscribe?
If you enjoyed that video, why not subscribe? It'll help me and Natty continue to do the work that we're doing, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Thanks!